but it's a pleasure to be here, to be able to talk with you. It's a joy, Professor. That's great.
The pleasure is all mine. You are very welcome. Our audience is waiting with lots of affection. I hope we can have a heart to heart conversation, right? That we can share things that are useful for people. As for my guest, I have no doubt about that. I just hope I can live up to it, okay?
Absolutely.
Well, I thought about starting our conversation in a way that I always use with my students, actually. I tell them the following. Imagine that a philosopher from the past, Plato for example, traveled in a time machine for 2,400 years and came to us right now and asked you, who are you? How would you define your identity?
Look how interesting. I have a story that isn't that old, but it's about a monk named Bodhidharma. And in the 6th century, he goes from India to China and has a conversation with the emperor. The emperor says to him, I have done many good things, translated many texts, helped many monks and monasteries. I have merit, don't I? And Bodhidharma says, no merit. The emperor doesn't like that very much and asks, what is sacred to you? He said, nothing. The emperor asks, and who are you? Who is standing in front of me? And he says, I don't know. So, for us, the main answer that comes is this I don't know. There is no I don't know. If there is still an I that doesn't know, that's extra. But when you strip away all the roles, all the ideas, all the concepts of who I am to reach that place where there is no separate being, right? That would be the essence of the teaching, right? This is the absolute point of view. So much so that, after this historical figure, Bodhidharma, he ends up leaving. The emperor is very angry with him and he said, I broke the vase without looking back. I mean, he wasn't able to have a dialogue with this emperor in a way that would bring up and not just talk about the absolute, right?
I'll show.
But also about the relative. It's my relative.
The story of Bodhidharma is very beautiful.
Beautiful, isn't it?
This story is really beautiful. And actually, that's why when I said the theme of our life would be inner emptiness,
Yes.
I made a point of asking about inner emptiness in its negative sense, which is that existential anguish we usually feel. Because inner emptiness, in the sense of dissolving separateness, the heresy of separateness, as the Tibetan tradition calls it, is extremely necessary.
Exactly.
And it's interesting that we fear emptiness, right? We run away from it. The Bardo Thodol talks precisely about the primordial light when we die, which is exactly when we face this luminous emptiness that would be the absence of any separateness, the whole. When we discover that we are a single cell of the whole. You certainly know that story about the Sutratma, which is told in India.
Yes.
About a pearl, she was proud of her shine and felt like the most beautiful pearl on that string. And at a certain point, she exhausts that experience and starts to turn inward, searching for something deeper. When she searches, in reality, she didn't know how to see anything other than pearls. So she finds a great emptiness, because the thread running through her was made of silver, and she didn't recognize silver. So, after searching so much in the midst of that emptiness, she ends up identifying the silver. She realizes, well, I have a piece of silver inside me. I found my essence. How wonderful it would be if all these other. Now, what she doesn't know is that the piece of silver running through her and through all the other pearls on the necklace is actually a single thread. It's all one thing, which is really the final step, right? Where we find our true identity. And that would be emptiness in its positive sense. This emptiness that we all seek. Emptiness of anything that separates us.
Exactly. An emptiness of an independent and separate self identity. There's a phrase from Buddha that I really like nothing has a substantial, independent, and separate self identity. We are this world, all of it manifesting and constantly transforming. And everything is linked, interconnected. So the idea of a separate self is just that an idea, not a reality.
Absolutely. It's like the example of running your finger through the sand at the edge of the beach and making a groove, and then making another groove. We can say there are two grooves, but in reality, both grooves, the space between them, and everything around them are just sand. Suddenly, a breeze comes along and everything returns to its unity, to its single substance.
Exactly.
That's something that, well, you probably know even better than I do, actually, that people are afraid of this, as if it meant losing their own identity, as if they would stop being themselves, when in reality, that's the very moment when they truly become themselves. They never were before.
That's exactly right. Once I had a lady, she was Swiss. She arrived at our monastery in Nagoya, Japan, and my superior asked me to welcome her and take her to the meditation room. And a little before she sat down to meditate, she said, "Monk, I'm very afraid of losing my identity. And when I go to meditate, it feels like I'm going to lose my identity." So I joked with her and said, "Did you bring your passport?" She said, "I did." "Then don't worry, you can lose your identity and you won't lose anything." And that's what you said, we're going to find ourselves, right? Because sometimes we create a fantasy. I'm going to find Buddha. I'm going to become Buddha. You're not going to become Buddha, no. You're going to become yourself, right? And people always have an expectation of something separate, better than themselves or worse than themselves, anyway. But finding yourself, and there's also an expression used by an 8th century monk in China who said he wanted to fish for the big fish, which meant to fish for himself, which is to know yourself. That would be the great catch, because he was a fisherman, right? That would be the biggest catch he could ever make, this meeting of himself with himself. And then, as you say, there's this emptiness that's actually full, right? It's not the emptiness of sadness, of loneliness, of a false idea that I'm alone in the world, you know? But on the contrary, it's realizing that nothing is fixed and nothing is permanent. Everything is interconnected and in motion. And we are that movement, right?
Ava. It's interesting how, when we let go of this sense of separateness that we believe to be our identity, virtues flow so naturally. How easy it is to be brotherly, how easy it is to be generous, how easy it is to be altruistic. And it's no longer about something I'm forcing onto a separate self, which deep down just wants to think about itself. It's about a being that sees itself as a whole and naturally radiates all the benefits to this body, which is all part of itself too, right? So, sometimes I think it's not that this search is difficult, I think it's just not being understood or pursued. One thing is having difficulty along the path, another thing is not even knowing that the path exists. We're on a track that says affirming our fleeting identity is what we should do, and that we should raise its status within this hierarchy of separate beings, right?
My superior at the monastery, she used to say that it's not always important to just be the bridge, because we say we can be a bridge, right? Over which all beings cross. You say there's the other side, because there are people who don't know that the other side exists. There's a different way of being in the world. She says, sometimes we seem to be the boatman, who's there saying, listen, I can take you to the other shore, but the person has to actually reach the other shore. And when you reach the other shore, that's when we talk about prajnaparamita, right? The perfect wisdom that leads to the other side. You realize it was always there, and at the same time, you notice how many people still haven't arrived. And then you make the bodhisattva vow, right? How do I help all these people to arrive, to enter and awaken, right? The word Buddha means exactly that, the one who awakens, the one who has awakened. How can we help people to awaken? To access this shore of wisdom, this emptiness full of all possibilities, of not having the idea of self. And as you say, when we access this level of consciousness, something arises, which we'll talk about. In Buddhism, we talk about the foundation, the two, right? Wisdom and compassion. One can't exist without the other, right? You need to have wisdom, a clear perception of reality, a deep understanding, and at the same time, a tenderness, a sense of care, because you realize you are interconnected, linked to everything and everyone.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What I notice is that there's an ancient pre Socratic philosopher who talked about this, that time is an illusion of consciousness moving over the unknown. I think, actually, it's like I'm moving forward with a flashlight over people in a room. I see the first person, I see the second, I see the third. But if I flipped the light switch, I would realize that everyone was there the whole time. In other words, reality is not something that will become. It always was. What we're really doing is fighting against the illusions that keep us from consciously integrating with reality. That's the process we call growth or evolution. But if we bring it down to a more everyday situation, more down to earth, talking about our inner emptiness, which was the topic of our conversation, not the inner emptiness of that luminous void of someone who has found themselves in the whole, but the inner emptiness of a person who no longer sees any meaning in life. That existential anguish. How could we find a way out of this anguish that today leads so many people, for example, to suicide? It's a time when this has become critical, and increasingly so, even in highly developed countries. In other words, it's not a matter of material prosperity. This emptiness, this inner anguish that suddenly makes life seem like nothing. What would you advise these people?
The question is, does life have meaning? Isn't that meaning enough? Isn't appreciating every moment of life enough? Is it that because some people come to me thinking they have a very special mission. That bothers me a little too. I have a mission. I'm special. I'm different from everyone else. I said, that's when you just got off track. But it's also not that I'm the same as everyone else. We're similar, but not identical. And we need to find our own role and our own place. And you have to search, because without searching, there is no finding. How do you encourage people to look for their place, their comfort zone, and at the same time, it has to be somewhat uncomfortable, so they can express themselves more assertively? So, if things, first, I think we have a lot of harmful news. Everything that's happening in the world now has already happened in the past too. Wars, abuse, disasters, plagues, all kinds of collapses, volcanoes erupting, these things have always happened. What hap nowadays, we immediately know what's happening all over the world. So it feels like everything is terrible, that there's no solution, that it's the end of the world, right? It's all ending, because there's no more solution and my life loses its meaning. Nothing I do makes sense, because everything is ending. There are only people killing, dying, murdering, wars, missiles, torture, abuse of all kinds. But there are beautiful things happening too. Can we realize that there is both light and shadow, and that both are necessary for our existence? Can I realize that? But how do you help someone who's so deep in that darkness, right? So covered by the veils of ignorance, as we call it, how do you remove that? How do you make someone want to remove it? Because it's not something that comes from the outside in. My superior, I was with her just now in July, in Japan, she's 90 years old, and she told me two very important things. One of them, she said, I'm never going to retire, because there's no retirement from life. I'll always be teaching, giving classes, welcoming people here. And she said, but it's not me who teaches, and it's not me who makes people awaken. Each person who comes to me awakens me. Each person who approaches me stirs something in me and transforms me. So it's a continuous process, isn't it? Can we really make people? Can we really light that flame in them? The flame is there, but it's really small, right? It's almost going out. How can we encourage that flame to grow? The search, the questioning. Existential questions can't just be swept under the rug. We've had them since childhood, adolescence. And there are people who don't want to think about that and keep believing the world is just about material things, right? If I have professional success, and sometimes I have all of that and it's still not enough, because that's not sufficient for the human mind, for a human being. We need more. We like to think. We like to doubt, to question. It's important to do that, not to lose that. Not to say, oh, I already know. I don't know. I know a part, but there's always so much more to know, isn't there? Once, Buddha called his disciples. He was in the middle of the forest and he picked up a handful of leaves and said, "Do you think I have a lot of leaves here in my hand?" They said, "You have quite a few, yes, but compared to this whole forest, oh, then it's just a few." He said, "These are the teachings I have. They're not many." There is teaching everywhere, but you have to look for it, open up your ability to see, to hear, to feel, to be present in the world. And existential questions are really important for us to challenge each other, right?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, Plato used to say that the biggest obstacle to wisdom is thinking we already know. Thinking we own the truth is one of the things that makes us more difficult, for example, when it comes to living together. How much richer would it be if we understood that we are all a mix of light and shadow? And that when we put ourselves in someone else's shoes, seeing the world from their angle, from the psychological prism through which they see the world, we can absorb some of their light and offer our own.
Correct.
So, every human being who crossed our path would leave us a little bit greater. I find it interesting, this issue of purpose, because people often cling to projects as if they were purposes. Projects about having or not having things, doing one job or another, going or not going somewhere. These are projects that can be good or bad, but they're not enough to justify a life, right? I believe that to justify a life, it's defined by nature, that we are human beings. Nature expects plants to be plants, expects animals to be animals, and expects humans to be human. Values, virtues, wisdom that correspond to the role that was destined for them. Now, what are the professions? What are the occupations? Well, within your principles, whatever life offers and you consider prudent and interesting. That dose of challenge that must exist in life. As you already mentioned, right? You dedicate yourself to a profession or to whatever life brings you, which isn't necessarily what you imagined would be your fulfillment. Because our level of self knowledge is so low that many times we imagine that our calling, that which stands out. So many times, what life offers us, what it brings to us, has more to do with our growth than with what we would like. But all these things are just means. My clear purpose for human beings is defined by their own condition and by nature. To be human in the fullest way possible, here, now, and always. A broader and broader surrender to life, honoring what nature expects from us, right?
Exactly. Honoring all that ancestry as well, right? We are the result of millions of lives, aren't we? Millions. We can't waste this existence. Time, we are time. That's a phrase from Master Dogen, who is the founder of my order in the 13th century, right? He wrote a very beautiful chapter that says, "We are time, time existence, we are not separate, but at the same time, time is laughing." And if we don't wake up, we might waste this opportunity to be human. Like you said, being human is enough, but being a true human being. Yesterday I was invited to watch the Kurosawa movie called Dreams by Akira Kurosawa. I hadn't seen it in many years, and now I see it differently too, of course. The movie is from 1990, right? But it goes through a lot of things that we humans have done, things that aren't beneficial. Wars, pollution, radiation, profit, wanting to win, throwing away milk, hiding food to raise product prices. And the last of the dreams he presents, is about people who live in harmony with nature, who flow like the waters where they live, and all of them have great longevity because they live naturally, and most of them die at over 90, 100 years old, because they lived according to nature, just like you just said. A tree has the nature of a tree, and I respect it as a tree. In fact, the movie starts with one of Kurosawa's first little dreams, where the little boy says that they cut down all the peach trees, right? And he's very, very sad because, and then people ask, are you sad because you like to eat peaches? He says, no, because I like the trees, because I like the peach trees. So he says, I'm going to let you see them one more time. Then all the little peach blossoms, right, the little peach leaves, fall over him, and the joy that comes from our connection with nature. In the last episode of the movie, he talks to this old man, but don't you have electricity here? He said, what for? We have candles, lanterns, because at night we like to look at the stars, and sometimes we forget that, right? That it's good to turn off the lights and look at the stars, look up at the sky.
Yeah, I find it interesting, this ability that children have to look at things from the inside. I always tell a story about my own daughter when she was still little, and it was during a time when there was water rationing. One of her classmates at school said she wasn't going to save water because her dad could pay for it, and my daughter, she came home really upset. Mom, it's not because her dad can pay, it's about the water. Poor thing. She's going to be so sad to be treated like that. I thought that was so interesting. She was thinking like the water. She was giving water a right to exist just like her own. And that's a level of empathy that sometimes we can't even have with another human being, right? What about nature as a whole? It's about letting everything flow so that everything can be in harmony. It's a pretty interesting idea. Well, moving on to our next case, our next question, since we've already talked quite a bit about the issue of inner emptiness, right? It would be, what is the purpose of us being here, in your view? Not just the Buddhist perspective, but your own.
Being present where we are and doing the best we can in this moment, and pushing ourselves to be better than we are. Better than we are, I mean being more present, being more whole wherever you are. Not being divided, not having one part of you here and another part somewhere else. Not, because sometimes we like to do two or three things at once and end up not doing any of them very well, but whatever you're doing, and you can almost do two or three things at the same time, but you are fully present in each one of them. And I really like a story about Musashi, a samurai named Musashi, who was a great fighter, used two swords in the Middle Ages in Japan, and one time he was attacked by 25 other samurai. He came out very, very wounded, but he survived. And they asked him, how did you do it? And he said, one by one. And that's pretty much it, because sometimes we think we have too many challenges, even me. Sometimes I think I have to do this, I have to do that, it's just so much. Will I be able to handle it? Can I do it? And then you start getting overwhelmed, your breathing gets shallow, you can't do things properly, you start getting irritated, and you end up snapping at someone. Then I tell myself, hold on, Manya, stop and breathe. I have to remind myself, breathe, take a moment, it's all okay. It's one thing at a time, each thing will get done, and when we're focused and present, we can actually get more done in a day, even in just a few minutes. You don't need to spend 10,000 hours, but in those minutes when you're studying, focus on what you're studying. Question yourself, ask yourself things, play around with yourself. Studying should be enjoyable, not a sacrifice. It has to be something good to do. If it's unpleasant, it's not going to work out, right? And it's not just about memorizing, it's about understanding so you can explain it in your own words, right? Not just, like you said, not just repeating the texts, but what do you think about it, right? And that's how I try to challenge myself and others to be present. Appreciate your life. Are there difficulties? Of course there are. Are there sad moments? He has. Are there happy moments? He has. There's night, day, rain, sun, light, and shadow. And this is what we are. And am I really present in what I'm doing? I really love to write, and there are times when I stop writing, and I feel like something's missing that is, because when I write, I don't really plan out the book. Maybe that's even a mistake, but I don't plan it. I let out whatever is inside me, whatever has built up over weeks or months and wants to come out as a voice, as words, as images. With all the studies I've done, the practices I've taken part in, sometimes even the text I write surprises me, because it's me and yet not just me. It's me and all these other influences that have reached me. The information, the studies, the reflections, they're not just outside of me either. And if they don't become something of my own, it's just a parrot talking. I mean, it doesn't have the awareness of, it knows how to repeat a sound, but it doesn't know, it doesn't understand the meaning of that sound, which is something that happens in some of our religious orders, and the founder of my order used to complain a lot about that. Because there's a religious order that is precious, it's sacred, that says Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu, which is the highest honor to Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of light. And he used to say, if you don't have faith, it's like you're a frog croaking, right? Coke, 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 just repeating a word that doesn't have any meaning in your heart. And if it doesn't make sense in our hearts, it's no good either, right? So what? What meaning do we give to our lives? What purpose? And if you start, I say, people come to me and say, Monk, I know I have a special mission. I say, oh, that's scary. Well, because you start creating a fantasy. I'm a special being. I have a special mission. Your special mission is to live. I shave my head, but it grows back. We cut our nails, and they grow back, right? The heart beats all the time. And the mind, it thinks and it also doesn't think. And one isn't better than the other. There are moments when there are no thoughts, nothing at all, just pure presence. And there are moments when it's a wonderful turbulence, and you don't have to run from one to the other, but recognize that all of this makes up a human being, right?
The fundamental special lesson is to discover that our personality isn't special.
That's it.
It's just a personality.
Exactly.
It's a vehicle that should be respected, but knowing that it's just a personality, that's not our true identity. I always like to say, when it comes to this question of the meaning of life, of what we came here to do, that need I think every human being has to leave the world a little better than how they found it. He himself will leave here a little more aware, a little more clear-headed than he was when he arrived. That the world and the people around me are a little better because I existed. It's that thing when someone comes up to you and says, thanks to you, I was able to achieve something. That's such a glorious moment. It's as if it justifies a whole life. The other side is the in spite of you, right? In spite of you, I did what I did. That's terrible. So, this idea that we can't settle for the size we are, we can't let ourselves be paralyzed. We have to expand our awareness and make sure the world benefits in some way from our existence. To make a difference, not to live in vain. And sometimes we think we have to reach some perfect ideal of focus way down the road, when in reality, for that ideal in the future to be perfect, it has to be achieved through perfect moments starting right now. Moments when my body and mind are together. Carl Jung, he liked to use that expression. I really like Jung's work. He talked a lot about that. Body and mind together in every moment, leaving our mark on what we're trying to bring out, what is trying to be born within us, right? Leaving that mark on the world. I remember that some time ago, Monk, I had a dream that was so striking to me. I dreamed that I was pregnant, about to give birth, and the child wanted to be born, but I didn't want to let it. I was holding my belly, it was a terrible pain. I held my belly and didn't want to let it be born. When I woke up, I was so startled, still feeling a bit of pain. I woke up kind of dazed. I thought, wow, could it be that all my pains are this pain? Is it something really deep, something so beautiful that's trying to be born and I'm not letting it? Could it be that a big part of humanity's pain comes from this too? Is it something very deep, very real, that wants to make its mark in the world and we don't allow it? When we want to make something special, that's our personality. It's like you have a cell. Instead of valuing the prisoner, you value the bars. My bars are very special. My bars have a purpose. It's exactly when you start to value the bars less that you find what's behind them. It's in simplicity, in humility, in the spirit of wanting, that things add up. Every single day of your life. I think of Marcus Aurelius, who was a great Stoic philosopher. He used to say we should make death our advisor. If I were to die tomorrow, what kind of human being would I want to be? What would I have wanted to build within myself throughout my life? What virtues would I want to have? When I look back and see the path I've taken, what would I have wanted to do for the world? What would I have wanted to do for others? When I realize this need to make a difference, well, that has to radiate into every day of my life now. It's like someone building a house. The architect draws up the plans, and every day, the foreman has to look at those plans to know what to do today. So, if we want to make a difference, these are fulfilling days, days when we push ourselves to the limit of our abilities to give our very best in whatever we do. There's a thinker I really like, Helena Blavatsky, who used to say, whoever does their best does everything that can be expected of them. You sleep the sleep of the just, right? The sleep of the just, for having given everything that was my responsibility today. Continuing our, did you want to say something?
No, wonderful. Go ahead.
Well, I asked a question that might even seem a bit paradoxical given everything we've discussed so far, because I notice it's a doubt that comes up in my lectures and with the people I talk to. People who arrive in today's society were never told that they could be a better human being than they are. They were told they could be more technically skilled at something, that they could be more economically sustainable for something, but that they could be a better human being. That's not something people are told. People suddenly think they're a finished product, that they are who they are and will always be that way, that nothing can change. I have a flaw and I'll die with it. It's like that joke we always make, right? Like Gabriella's jealousy. I was born this way, I grew up this way, and that's just how I am. I'll always be this way. In other words, people don't realize that it's possible to build other things within ourselves. I'd like you to talk a little about that. Can human beings improve themselves throughout their lives?
I believe that we are all in a state of movement and transformation, and that we can choose the direction of that transformation. We can choose any path. It's the story of free will, right? I can choose whether I go right, left, center, forward, backward, down, or up. But I also need to be aware that I am moving forward, and that as I move, I am transforming myself, and I need to allow myself to change, instead of getting stuck in the idea, this is just how I am. For me, when someone comes to practice with me and says, I want your advice, and then says, this is how I am, this is how I think, I tell them, first, throw that away. Everything you think you are and are holding onto out of fear of losing it, you need to let go of, because when you let go, the possibility for transformation appears. But if I hold on and cling to an idea of myself, I am like this, I think like this, I speak like this. No, you may be speaking like that now, but you could have an encounter, you could read a book, you could watch a class, you could meet someone and have a conversation with them, and you will change. And how beautiful that is. It's not about saying, I only think this way. No, we relearn how to think, and even learn to think in a different way, which you might not have learned at home, in your family environment. And you went on to learn it at school, learned it from a friend, learned it from a movie, from a book. A different perspective, another way of being and existing in the world. And we are constantly transforming ourselves. Look at my hands. I used to have these cute little hands when I was a child. Now I have arthritis. They're getting all crooked. There are certain things I can't control, but I can live with them. I'm not go. I'm not going to want to amputate my fingers. I'm not going to want to use metal rods to straighten them, and there aren't any medicines that can cure this right now, but I live with it. But this is also transformation, because they weren't like this before. And what will they be like 10 years from now? If I'm still here in 10 years, they'll probably be even more crooked. And if I don't even learn to appreciate this process of transformation, I'm going to get really upset. I want my cute baby hands back, just like when I was young, exactly the same. But they're not. And we are this process in transformation. Allowing yourself to change, allowing yourself to see things from other perspectives, right? What I really liked about Master Dogen, and I'm bringing him up again, he's from the 13th century, is that when I started practicing in Los Angeles, my teacher would say, "Don't read the translations, they're terrible," and he would give some lectures about Master Dogen. I found both volumes of his book at the public library, and I grabbed them right away. Because he had a way of thinking that was very different from mine. And sometimes I would listen to my teacher giving lectures in our meditation room in Los Angeles, and my logical mind, that more superficial part, would be saying, "I don't get it," but deep down, something inside me understood, and I wanted to understand more. I wasn't able to repeat what he had said, but something in me had absorbed it from somewhere else. And then I started reading more of this author and thought, how interesting. He would lead me to a certain place, and when I said, "I get it," he'd say, "But there's another way to look at it, too." And then he'd flip it around. And when I said, "Well, now I understand," he said, "But there's also another way to see it." I think that's so enriching, being able to see the world, reality, ourselves, from different angles and perspectives, not just one, not just this being that's always the same, always fixed. It's a being that's changing, that's open to change, but now also has to make choices. And then there's something really valuable, right? Because there are people who choose to spend their time talking nonsense on their phones, sending silly little messages, and using this amazing technology, this beautiful educational and pedagogical tool, just for nonsense. Just like there are TV programs that dull the human mind, while there are others that stimulate it. And my superior used to say, "We have to change the channel, because back then, when I was in the monastery, there weren't even computers yet, right?" She would say, "It's like you're watching TV and you're watching terrible soap operas about thieves, crimes, robberies. You have to change the channel," she would say. "You switch to the Buddha channel, and the Buddha channel is the channel of awakening, right? And you're the one holding the remote control. You can change the channel. You can switch your life to a different channel." I think that's really important, to show people that there's another way to be in the world, like asking yourself, "What good can I do today?" But it's not like I'm going to say. One time I made a mistake with this. It was right at the beginning of my practice, and I was at the center in Los Angeles, and there was a woman in a wheelchair in front of me. I thought, "I'm such a good person, right? The compassion of the Buddha. Now I'm going to put it into practice. I'm going to help this lady cross the street." The moment the light turned green and I grabbed her wheelchair, she said, "Please, don't do that. I've worked so hard to be able to get around on my own." And I realized that what I thought, "I'm doing something good," was completely wrong. What is appropriate for the circumstances? That's why I keep insisting, it's not about being nice, it's about being appropriate and correct, thinking and feeling for the other as an extension of yourself. But it's another person with different needs, not your own need to impose yourself, like, I'm good, I'm going to do good, I'm saving the world. No, I'm doing what's appropriate in this situation. There's that story about the monk who saw a scorpion in the water, drowning, and he didn't have anything to grab the scorpion with, so he used his hand to save it, and the scorpion stung him. And people said to him, "How awful! Didn't you know the scorpion was going to sting you?" He said, "It's in the scorpion's nature to sting, and it's in my nature to try to take him out of the water." So, what is our true nature? What is it that we feel, deep down inside? It's like children, right? I have a great grandson, and he'll pick up any insect, hold it in his hand, and say, "This is my little pet." It's such a beautiful thing. I wouldn't pick up those insects myself. But he does. It's so cute, isn't it? "This is my little pet." Everything is our little pet. Are we capable of going back to that simplicity of being present in the world, changing and learning? And what about curiosity? What is this? Why is it like this, right? Never lose that. And it's not just something that happens at a certain time in life. It's your whole life. We're always asking, why? What's going on? Can it be different? When I look at what happened on October 7th over there in Israel, and this whole issue with Gaza, Rue, the issue with Russia, with, in Africa, people at war. Here in Brazil, we see on TV crimes, people being killed, robberies. But there is a way for things to be different. It's possible. That terrifying robber, he can be someone else, he can change. And if we don't believe in that, we shut down our understanding, we build, like you said, bars and walls. There's no way. That person is no good. Everyone is capable of transformation. Everyone, without exception, even those who seem impossible. I know a lady, she's a physical therapist, and she takes in many children, teenagers, people that AACB won't accept because, as she says, statistically speaking, these are the ones considered incurable. And she said, there are changes. They're very subtle, but you can notice them if you follow along, if you're there with them, that human beings are constantly transforming and that we can help with that transformation, moving toward, I'd say, a healthier place. Physical, mental, social, and spiritual health. I really like to use the word whole, as in wholeness or holiness, because to me that's what it means. A whole person, a healthy man, a healthy woman, because they have health, physical, mental, social, and spiritual. Because, like you said, Jung used to say that, right? Nothing is separate. Body and mind are one.
Everything you said about learning from each person, about expanding, about realizing that we have a universe of possibilities for growth, is really interesting, isn't it? To realize the amount of things there are to discover within ourselves and to discover within others. And love knowledge itself. I noticed something interesting about this historical moment we're living in. We've reached a point, a level of objectification, where everything has become a means and not an end in itself. It kind of reminds me of what Bauman says about liquid modernity. So people want knowledge to gain access to something, to gain status, to get a higher income, and not for the sake of knowledge itself. In other words, an intrinsic goal. I want knowledge for its own sake, not for what I can gain or lose from it in external, material terms. I find it really interesting how people can claim to know something deeply when they don't actually love knowledge itself. And this attitude even extends to our relationships. It's gotten to the point where even another person's company, the other person, has also become just a means. Immanuel Kant said it was immoral to treat a rational being as a means and not as an end in itself. We treat human beings as a means to ease our loneliness, so that we don't feel isolated in the world, so that we can find someone to witness our personal lives. In other words, we end up objectifying everything, turning everything into material things, right? Into concrete things. It's very interesting how, not just with learning, but with many other things in life, we treat them as means and never reach their true beauty. Imagine using love as a means to achieve something. To achieve what exactly? Imagine if I treated justice as just a means, and often that's what happens because I'm just. Because there's a social conditioning that if I'm not, I'll be punished. And if I am, let's say, society will be more tolerant with me, I'll get access to certain things. But if no one is watching, kindness. Why should I be kind? Because I'll be rewarded, recognized. People will like me, but if no one is watching, why would I be kind? In the end, all the fundamental things in life become just means, and not ends in themselves. It's really curious how there's such a lack of curiosity about the important things in life, about vital things. When I read the Platonic dialogues, most of which have Socrates as the main character, I'm amazed at how much that man wanted to know everything. That was vital to him. And not only that, but also how he was able to truly commit himself to knowledge. There's a passage in one of the dialogues where he debates with the sophist of the time, Gorgias. He goes up to him and says, "Don't run away from the debate, Gorgias, because if you convince me that your argument is truer than mine, tomorrow you'll find me on the street living out what you said." Just imagine that. If you convince me that what you're saying is closer to the truth than what I'm saying, tomorrow you'll find me on the street living that out. In other words, a complete integration between what we think and how we live. It's a bit like the Christian tradition: by your works you shall be known, not by your theories, your concepts, or your titles. In other words, an integration of things in life, a legitimacy that is inherent to the human condition, right? We are fluid about everything. We've lost fundamental things in life. We treat everything as a means, including other human beings.
That's true.
Continuing our conversation, in your personal experience, what do you think is the most valuable and effective tool we have to face adversity? Whether it's a situation where we go through something that wasn't in our plans, or we don't feel prepared for it, or it catches us by surprise, whatever the case may be. How should we position ourselves in life to better overcome these adversities?
We have to go through difficulties, and we simply can't run away from them or ignore them. But how do we cross these thresholds that are often gateways to deeper knowledge? One of the things my superior also said to me this July, she said, in these 4 years, I hadn't seen her for 4 years, and during that time I had many illnesses, including intestinal cancer. She said, I am grateful to the Buddhas of illness, because they transformed me, they made me a better person. So, I don't want to fight against adversity, but if it comes to me, what can I learn from this difficulty? Is there a way to go through it without running away? Is there even a way to surrender to it? When we do very intense meditation practices, like when I started in the United States, we would do retreats with many hours of meditation, always in the same position. So the body would hurt a lot, it would complain a lot. My teacher at the time used to say, become the pain, don't run from the pain, be the pain, even if in your mind you're just screaming in pain, but stay present with what's happening. Don't run away from the present. It's the only way for you to transform reality. So, if adversity comes, can I say, welcome? Because what can I do with this? How do I get through this? How do I make it to the other side? How can this enrich me instead of making me poorer? Again, it's that same story. Whatever comes to me is something that can teach me something and open up portals of perception that weren't open before. And sometimes diversity comes to show this. It's not how I wish it would be, it's how it is. And do I accept that it is the way it is? Look, accepting things as they are isn't pacifism, because people say, oh, so it's pacifism, whatever comes is fine. No, whatever comes, I recognize it for what it is, but what I do about it is something else entirely. Someone will. Just yesterday, I was at the movies, and someone was saying, oh, but I have a relative who has cancer. I said, then take care of them. It's no use just praying for a cure for cancer. We go to the doctors, do the treatments, and stay by their side. And if there's no cure, you stay with them until the end. Just be there for them, with care and affection. Don't give up on the person. As long as they're alive, it's life. At the moment of death, it's death. Life doesn't turn into death. Life is its own period, and death is its own period. One doesn't turn into the other. While we're alive here, who knows for how many years, months, or days, let's appreciate life and use this potential of the human mind, this precious thing, which is like a state-of-the-art computer, but we often use it to do the most to deceive, and we lose the beauty of using this mental capacity, of perception, of discovery. It's hard. It's actually good that there's something difficult that I have to solve. My mother really liked to study, you know? So, after she separated from my father, she went to college again, and I remember she would come home at night and sit at this little card table that my grandparents used to play cards on. She would open up the card table in her room, put her books and notebooks on top, and say, "Now I'm going to study." And she would almost be drooling. It was like, for her, studying was the best thing in the world. And she had a really hard time with statistics. And she said, it was wonderful. The professor's name was Severo, her professor, and she said he was very strict. Almost no one passed statistics, right? She passed without having to take the oral exam, and she said, I racked my brain, but I understood it. And how good it was to have to rack her brain. I don't understand it now, but I can understand it. If someone else understood this, then I can understand it too. If someone else got through this difficulty, these adversities of the world and of life, then I can get through them too. I don't give up on myself. I don't give up on my human ability to overcome these difficulties. I don't just sit around waiting for some divine force to come and take me. That divine force is something you create yourself by believing in yourself and seeking out partners, seeking out knowledge on how to get through difficulties, right? They aren't obstacles that stop you, on the contrary. I usually give people an analogy. If you want to reach the essence of your being, the most intimate part of your innermost self, there are guardians. And these guardians will only let you in if you are pure. If you go in with the idea of personal gain, like you mentioned about objectifying things, I'm going to access that because I'll become so famous, people will like me so much, right? If you have those motives, then you can't get in, you get stuck. The guardians are there, they won't let you through. You get to the threshold and you can't go any further, you just can't, right? But if you let go of the idea of gain, let go of the idea of fame, of power, it's like everything just opens up, you know? Things just open up, right? So what used to be an opposing force actually becomes your partner and takes you along to a higher level of consciousness. So don't think there's something out there stopping you. The one stopping me is myself. And how do I get in touch with my innermost self to say, let go of that energy, release it, just let it go, let it go. Let's go together, right? That's a phrase I use so often.
There's a passage in Roman Stoicism from Marcus Aurelius where he said, nothing happens to a man that is not proper to man, meaning, nothing happens to Lucia that isn't proper to Lucia. In other words, it's as if we imagine that we came into this world to smooth out some rough edges, and we leave here more human than when we arrived. And this need to work on these points draws into our lives, as if by magnetism, exactly the circumstances that will hit those spots and be able to smooth out those rough edges.
Muslim.
In other words, a person doesn't have problems just to chase after me, but they came into my life because I needed that experience.
True.
If it hadn't been them, it would have been someone else just like them. A circumstance didn't happen because of me, but it came into my life because I needed to go through that.
Right.
In other words, it's like we take responsibility. Nothing happens to me that I'm not supposed to experience. There's no one out to get me. There's no such thing as bad luck, no. I attract into my life the things I need in order to grow.
Exactly.
If it hadn't been this circumstance, it would have been something similar. In other words, there's nothing out there chasing me. There's no reason to shift responsibility. I am responsible for my own life. My needs and experiences are attracting into my life what I'm going through, so that I can become a better human being. And that's really interesting, because when we're faced with a problem, and I always advise people to do this, I only want to come out the other side bigger than when I went in. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. I want to come out the other side bigger than when I went in, more than I was when all of this started.
That's right.
We are running out of time, none.
Wonderful.
We don't have much time left. I wish we could stay here for another 2 hours, right? There's so much to discuss, so much to talk about, so many ideas to exchange, because what we notice is that within Buddhism, within philosophy, we have a lot in common.
Yes.
All those who were great, who climbed pretty far up the mountain, saw the same thing planted up there at the top, right? It doesn't matter if one speaks one language and another speaks a different one. Everyone who climbed high enough up the mountain saw that at the top there was the same tree, and even though they describe it in different ways, they're talking about the same thing. I found that very beautiful and very interesting. I'm very grateful for your presence, and it's an honor to have had you here with me. I am grateful for my followers. I think this conversation will be very useful for all of them, really. And I wish you an excellent end of the year. May you be able to renew your energy in 2024, ready for new challenges.
Likewise, I deeply thank you, Professor, for your invitation. I learned a lot. I feel like I'm leaving here better and greater than when I came in, and I was sure of that. That meeting with you, Professor, would be excellent, and that together we could reflect on different perspectives and words. Like you say, it's like climbing a mountain, maybe not by the same path, but reaching the same place. May all beings awaken and have a wonderful end of the year, and may 2024 be full of discoveries, renewal, and health. Lots of health. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, man. Good night. Good night to everyone who's joining us. Thank you so much, and let's keep going. Until next time. Thank you.
See you later. Thank you.